Hello YouTube, this is LunaHound93. It's been 10 months since my last upload onto the channel. I've been busy and just everything around, from work to illnesses that I've had to deal with, to my own personal life, my own issues, not to mention global issues that has happened. I haven't been able to really upload for the longest time. The reason I'm making this YouTube video is through pretty much a reaction or response to a video that I saw earlier today. And also for the fact of the conclusional factor of me and my friends wondering about a certain subject that revolves around the Star Wars franchise. Recently we went to Disneyland and we had a fun time, and we pretty much declared ourselves Sith by getting red lightsabers to just joke around with, and pretty much got everybody to look at us very confusingly. And me and my group of friends decided to talk about Star Wars and Legends and Canon and what we could do for Legends and Canon. And one name of a Legends character that came up that recently we thought about, and we have seen YouTube videos of, that has been out there, of what would happen, how would we make a character that is in Legends become canon into the main story. And this character is Galen Marek. And for those who don't know who Galen Marek is, he's this guy. His name is Galen Marek. He's also known as Starkiller, and he's part of the Force Unleashed franchise. And so me and my friends we're talking about him and wondering how would he fit if we wanted to put him in a timeline while still keeping him to his kind of story background and, well, his power. So this is my opinion on the story, and we've seen other YouTubers. One in particular YouTuber that I just like I mentioned, just watch, that makes me want to respond to this video. I'll link his original video down in the description bar. I would recommend watching it, even though it's been 2 years since he's made it. But it was still something that kind of brought up my mind about it. And it's something I have mentioned to my friends, and I'm, well, wanting to share it now. Okay, so in the original story of Galen Marek, or in the Force Unleashed game, Darth Vader with the 501st attacked Kashyyyk. Okay, keep in mind this is spoilers, but at this point it's been many years since the Force Unleashed games have kind of come and went. So if you don't know the story, then I don't know what to tell you, other than it's been quite a few years already that has been out there. So spoilers if you haven't known the story. But so in a nutshell, Starkiller story starts on Kashyyyk, where Darth Vader, along with the 501st, attacked the Kashyyyk planet looking for a Jedi, which is Galen's father, a former Jedi. In killing his father, Vader finds the boy and decides to take him on as his secret apprentice for seeing such strong Force abilities in him. So as the years go by, he becomes a fully strong acolyte of the Force, and Vader sends him off on missions to prove himself, to see if he's strong enough to confront him, because Vader's main goal is to confront Sidious. And through the task, Galen Marek becomes stronger, and eventually he and his master were meant to confront Sidious, but in turn Vader betrays Galen Marek, attempts pretty much an attempt killing him, and, well, to show his loyalty to the Emperor, although he does reconstruct Galen and tells him that he needs to build a rebellion to distract the Emperor, and then they could officially strike against him, because the Emperor will already know that they're plotting against him. So and then Galen Marek starts kind of building the Rebel Alliance, and eventually Vader, well, tracks him down and basically takes over the Rebel Alliance in a way of just, to kill them, to execute them, to find out that Starkiller was just a pawn to finding the Emperor's enemies to destroy them, apparently. Galen eventually finds his own peace with this and decides to turn away from being a Sith and try to take a role as relatively of a Jedi, just not entirely a complete Jedi, and decides to go and save, well, the Rebel Alliance, to save his allies. Which ultimately, by the construction of the Death Star, Galen Marek pretty much defeats everyone that he comes across, including Vader and Sidious, the Emperor. But in turn, to save his friends, to save the Rebel Alliance, he ultimately had to do the ultimate sacrifice in order to save them, becoming one with the Force. Or so Game 1 put it. Game 2, and again, spoilers, but the story has been out for years. Game 2, his clone appears and becomes pretty much his story arcing, where he is trying to find his love interest, Juno, from the first game. And ultimately, it's kind of a hunting game, looking for her, and ultimately returning back to where he was cloned from, and ultimately had to make the decision of confronting Vader once again. And, despite what you choose, good or bad, just like in the previous game, but the story is if he spares Vader, he's with her, only to then be tracked down by Boba Fett, and eventually Vader will be freed, and that's kind of where the story of Galen Marek ends completely. So, that's technically relatively the original background story, at least in game aspect. That's kind of where Galen Marek's story ends. Power-wise, he's a powerhouse. He's mastering of the Force is very vast. He's very powerful, very potentially gifted with the Force, and has different varieties of Force powers, both in the light and the dark. To the point, like I mentioned, he challenges Vader and even confronts and kind of defeats Sidious at a point. So, great potential in this Force user. So, that's his original story. So now what could be the new canon for him, since he's in Legends, and say you want to have him in the original, in the background of the canon story. So, okay, so in the canon right now, what we have is everything is relatively the same. However, of course, there's Sith Inquisitors now, especially from what we saw from Star Wars Rebels and, well, the Star Wars comics, both in the comics of Vader and just beyond. So, what we have in mind is that Galen Marek is actually, and this is my interpretation, Galen Marek is actually a Sith Inquisitor, one of their strongest, and is actually a more favored Inquisitor to Darth Vader. That Vader sees more of a potential of an apprentice within this Inquisitor, Galen Marek, and he decides to not only have him be his go-to Inquisitor to track down renegades, rebellions, and, well, still hidden Jedi, which kind of continues on to what Galen originally was meant to be doing with Vader when he was doing tests for him, was finding Jedi to destroy, and, well, just in general, find the Empire's enemies. So it fits the idea that he will be this Inquisitor that follows that rule with Vader. But in turn, Vader does favor him as a go-to to do so, but he also secretly trains him more than what the other Inquisitors are allowed to know. Because, again, Vader will want to take the power, especially in the comics. Vader wants to eventually overthrow the Emperor, but he knows alone he can't, so he does a lot to try to make it happen. So we could even have it right here where it could be stretched that he puts Galen Marek as this potential apprentice that he could take on the Emperor with. And, well, that will give Galen his power, his potential power, his training with Vader, his going across the galaxy, fighting Jedi and enemies of the Empire, much to his kind of story arc. And in a way, it will fit more into the renegading style that he is an Inquisitor. So that could be the case scenario. And of course, the other case scenario is him turning good and joining the side of the rebellion. We could even have it that it's either through maybe a confrontation with Ahsoka, who in this timeline would probably have already fought Vader during her time in Malachor, after her fight with him. maybe he gets a change of heart by her, or just by pure just inner conflict with the other Inquisitors, or both. If anything, Galen could have a change of heart and eventually turn against his master, and maybe fight against his master, like in the original story, to serve the rebellion. And we could even could even have him either die or stay alive until Luke Skywalker comes apart, and maybe he joins Ahsoka and Sabine Wren to look for Ezra from what they've done in the Star Wars Rebels. But you could even have it that he's an Inquisitor who is specifically trained by Vader in more ways of the dark side to make him even more stronger than any other Inquisitor. And you could even have it that, in turn, in story arcing, you could even have it that it's Galen Marek who destroys the Inquisitors, gaining more and more strength until he reaches Vader. And, well, because Vader trained him significantly, and he has a new passion with the rebellion, he fights Vader as well, and eventually, defeats Vader. Or, in some concept, we could even have it that he holds off Vader, if you don't want him to. But I feel like he could defeat him and ultimately spare Vader as a way of saying, I'm no longer serving under you, I'm above you. But either way. So it could work for the idea that I have that Galen Marek could be in canon and still keep his relative story arc of his original timeline intact, with a few changes, where he could just be a Sith Inquisitor working for the Empire, serving the Empire, however, being more, more in line with Vader as his go-to Inquisitor for missions, and also by in secret being trained more in the ways of the dark side by Vader, which gives him his power. And ultimately, the story timeline could be that during just a civil inner turmoil, civil conflict between the Inquisitors, or even just the sheer lack of trust in the Order of the Sith, and maybe with just some confrontations with Ahsoka or even others, Galen eventually turns sides and becomes a good guy, gray area good guy, and fights against Vader, fights against the Empire with the rebellion, and either he dies helping them or he continues on like Ahsoka and maybe does his own thing, or goes with Ahsoka, goes with Luke, or or dies protecting the rebellion like how in his original story arc did. So it could be possible to put Galen Marek as an actual character in the canon of Star Wars and keep his relative story of his original game counterpart intact by just implying the facts of here and there's of Inquisitor conflict and, well, his powers of his training. Well, that was my opinion, and like I said, I'll link the original YouTuber that I saw that I'm responding this to. I'll link his bio, his video down below, and check it out because it did give me some thoughts. And my first video in 10 months. I'm very rusty, so this has been Luna. This is LunaHound 93. Like, subscribe, join the pack, and I'll hopefully talk to you all soon. Bye.